Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review number 409. Today we're going to talk about the Undercity, a Iron Kingdoms adventure game. What this is basically a dungeon crawl, and you're going to be going through the Undercity and taking a team of either 3 or 4 characters through a campaign and playing through different scenarios. There's a few ways to play it. You can kind of play as one-shots. It's got a nice system for just picking an adventure, leveling up your character quickly to play that particular adventure. It's got side quests and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So it's very familiar in a lot of ways to a lot of your sort of standard games. I would immediately compare this to like the D&D adventure games or like a Galaxy Defenders or that style of game where you have an AI driven by the game and the players are playing cooperatively against the AI and then going through different scenarios and things. So let's jump into how the game works. I'm not going to go excruciating detail. There's a fantastic, actually, how to play on the Privateer Press website, and it's very well done, very high quality, and gives you all the rules right there in about 20 minutes, and you should be good to go. So let me just go through some of the rules and things though, and I'll come back and tell you what I think. So the setting for Undercity is you are a team of mercenaries called the Black River Irregulars, and you've been hired by the City Watch to go and investigate some different crimes and suspicious circumstances in the Undercity below Corvus City. So here we can see a very zoomed out view of the board, all of the miniatures. There's a ton of pieces and everything that you get in the game. You definitely get your money's worth in terms of actual components and plastic. Here you can see one of the boss characters. This is an example. It's super high quality, especially for this style of game. You don't have to assemble any of these miniatures. They're various different sizes, and all the characters are very distinct and unique from each other. And here you can see an interesting character. This is actually one character with 2 figures that a player will control, Pog and Doorstop. So you've got a little goblin character and his Steamjack, this giant mech that he controls. And then each player comes, of course, with their own character sheet. They have different special abilities that they can use and also different statistics, of course. Here we can see the Alchemist, and this is Milo Boggs. And he's kind of your ranged technician. He's got various grenades that you can throw for damage or smoke. Now each character also has a feat deck that is specific to them. And players start the game with 3 of these cards drawn face up, and they can use these during play. You can either play them for the effect on the card, and then each player has a ability that allows them to discard a feat card to activate a specific ability that's relevant to their class. Finally, each character has a deck of ability cards that they can purchase in between scenarios during the campaign. During the scenarios, you're going to acquire experience points, and then you can dig through your deck and choose different cards to buy and then add to your repertoire. So as I said before, you can start the game and play through a campaign starting at scenario 1 and go all the way through, or you can jump in and out and play some of your favorite scenarios. And what the game tells you to do is just add 10 experience points for each scenario that you would have completed. Go ahead and figure out which abilities you wanted to buy, add those to your characters, and then jump right in, and you should be balanced against that particular scenario. And it actually does work pretty well. I will say now, the best way to play the game, I think, is actually to play through the campaign. I'll talk more about that in the review, but there are some sort of details there that I think that's the best experience you can get. Now each scenario is going to tell you to arrange different squared tiles with different terrain features on top of this very generic board. And you can see here an example of one of the different types of terrains. You've got this little passageway, then if we flip it over, this actually becomes a cave-in space. And so this is a tile that players can actually interact with and attack. And then you've got other tokens and things like this particular dead body token. Maybe this is a character the players have to go investigate and rummage through their corpse to find evidence. So the board itself actually looks kind of generic and bland, I think, especially through a camera. And I noticed, when I did a little bit of a coverage of this at Gen Con, a lot of people made comments about how bland the board was, and I even thought the board looked pretty bland. But now that I've played this a few times, I like this. I really like the system of what they've done here because it really lends itself to sort of the cramped dungeon crawl type of space, and it's very easy to, have different maps and have different things. And so there's a lot in the scenarios that kind of drive how the players are going to react and things. And so this system actually works very well. They probably could have decorated a little bit more and add some little flair, blood on the walls or cobwebs and spider webs and stuff like that. But this actually works pretty well, I think. And the system for spawning new monsters is very interesting. So the design of the board kind of lends itself to some of the game mechanics, so I think that works very well. So I feel like that is maybe limiting a little bit what they did with the board. It could be a little bit more polished up with some cool artwork and stuff, but the system of the actual board stuff works really cool. Now, speaking of the system, let's quickly kind of go through how a turn works. Now, before players take their turn, every round an event card is going to be flipped over, and this event deck is custom made for each scenario. So the event deck also acts as kind of a timer. If you run through the event deck without having accomplished the goals, you lose. And you can see different types of events. There'll be environments that players have to deal with. And also it's going to sort of color code the actions for that round. So as different monsters are activated, some of the preference and priority is going to be given to the color of the model, actually based on the event that was flipped. And then the first thing that each player is going to do on their turn is actually roll 2 dice, and that's going to define which type of monster is going to spawn and where it's going to spawn. So off to the side of the board, you'll see stats cards for some of the different monsters. In this case, we can see the Troll Skin Scout, and underneath it, we can see it also has a 1 and a 2. You'll go ahead and assign these numbers based on the scenario instructions, and based on the number you roll, you're going to spawn this particular monster at one of the locations. You can see in this particular setup, I've got a 1, a 5, and a 3 at different points. So that's going to tell you where the monster is actually going to come out of. And different scenarios will actually change up these spawning rules and play with them a little bit to be more specific and relevant to the scenario. And then the current player will take the actions for their turn. This is usually just moving around and having combat. You can move up to 2 spaces. You can either hold and maintain the current space you're in, get a little bit of a bonus to a range attack if that character has one, or you can move 1 or 2 and do what's called a charge and actually get a little bit of an extra damage possibly to your attack. Now in the case of holding where you don't move, if Candace here had been in this particular spot and not moved, then she would get an extra bonus roll to her ranged attack. An attacking is very simple. You roll 2d6, and in this case, if we're doing ranged attacks, we would take the accuracy of our mage lock, our pistol, and add that to 2d6. So let's say we rolled an 11, we add the 5, and we've got 16. We'll compare that to the defense of our target. So in the case of this Trollkin Scout, 16 beats 13. If you get equal to or higher then that's considered a hit. And then you're going to roll 2d6 again and actually add the power number, in this case 8. So let's say we rolled a 7, so that would be 15, and then we would compare it to the armor, in this case again a 13 for the Scout. And then if you are greater than the armor, then that particular monster will take a damage. You can see the Trollkin actually has 2 vitality. Most of the monsters have 1 and they'll die right away. Now if you beat the armor by 5 or more, it'll actually take 2 damage. So in this case it would actually kill the Trollkin. So the combat is super simple. You roll 2d6, add your accuracy. If you get a hit, you roll 2d6 again, add your power compared to armor and so on. The hold and charge thing is pretty cool. So if you have a ranged person, you will just sit there and then you add a 3rd dice to that attack. So you have a little bit better shot. It's like aiming. And then again, if you charge, if you move a space or 2, then if you get a hit, then you get to actually add an extra dice for your damage. And then of course you have different feat cards. You can allow yourself to, get extra dice or boost your attack in different ways, or, reroll dice and all kinds of different stuff, maybe get an extra attack and so on. So it's very, very simple, very straightforward combat. And then we're going to talk about how the villains react, and their combat is going to work the same way. They're going to roll 2d6, apply it to whatever weapon they have, and then compare it to our defense and so on. It's worth noting though that if you do a melee attack and you have more than one melee weapon, you can hit with both weapons. So it's pretty cool because, like, let's say you do a charge with the big, orc guy, you run in, you charge, you get that first extra damage on that first hit, and then you can hit him again with your weaker weapon. So it's very visceral in that way, the way the combat works. You get to use all weapons. If you're doing range, you use all your ranged weapons. If you do melee, you get to use all your melee weapons. Of course, that works against you too. Now, it is possible for the scenario to have other key spots on the board that the player could interact with. So instead of taking a combat action, you can take a different action. In this case, here, interacting with this switch. And in this particular scenario, you can flip this tile here and that'll actually open a gate to allow easier passage for your characters. And there'll be other different cool things that you can interact with depending on the scenario. It's also worth noting that players all come with this potion that they can use on a player that's been incapacitated, and they can use this as their action to sort of rehabilitate that player. And then in between scenarios, you have a chance of getting a new potion and then carrying that forward into the next adventure. So after players have done their actions and their movement, then they're going to go into a villain step. and you're going to have a prepared villain deck for the particular scenario you're in, and then you'll flip a card and simply do what it says. Activate, in this case, a boss, or maybe in this case you'll activate multiple villains. And the priority system for who the monsters attack is very simple and intuitive. It works great, and you can see all this is actually really nicely laid out on this simple villain reference sheet. This is everything you need to know about how to activate the villains. It works very, very smoothly. And also note that each time you damage a villain, you're going to put an XP marker on this treasure chest. No matter who does any damage, you're going to put 1 XP per damage on here, as well as other things that are related to this scenario. For activating certain switches and things, you'll add more XP to this chest. And then at the end of the scenario, you're going to evenly divide all of the XP across all of the characters, so everybody's going to get an equal amount of experience. Okay, so that is the gist of the game. I didn't go over every last detail. Like I said, they have a fantastic video on their website that's going to give you, I think, 100% of the rules. I didn't talk about the different stats, so each player has like intelligence and perception, and different challenges and things are going to arise, and things that you're going to interact with, and you'll make a roll against that as well as the side quests. Now the side quests are a very, very cool addition to the game. Depending on where you're at in the campaign, you're going to take a certain number of side quests. Some of them will be cool items, some of them will be kind of crazy encounters that are just sort of random, and it's going to change up that scenario. You might have these like wandering jacks just coming through and messing everybody up. Jacks are like mechs. And you might also have like an actual side quest chain that you'll encounter, and that's pretty cool, because once you sort of trigger one of the side quest chains, then you're going to discard all the others out of the possibilities for upcoming scenarios, and then you're going to kind of just follow that chain. So it works out so that you will kind of do like one possible side quest chain along with kind of the main story. So you could go back and replay it, you know, and take out the one that you've already played and shuffle in the other ones randomly. So that's a really cool thing about the game. And I say that's, I kind of come down on this. It's an interesting sort of thing to talk about, because I think the game is a little bit too easy out of the gate, but it's very easy to make it harder. There are rules actually to make it harder. You can just flip over to the epic side of the different characters, and I would say do that 100%. If you are sort of like a gamer, you know, you play this kind of game all the time and you really want a challenge, definitely do that. It's not going to make it impossible, and I almost want to kind of pull back from saying it's too easy, because it's like you still have challenges and a little bit of drama there, but you never feel like you're ever going to lose this scenario. You're like, okay, I feel like we're doing okay. We can recover from this. But to sort of counteract that, there's a couple of things. I would say you want to play through the campaign as a whole, because you don't always carry over all of your health necessarily, and you don't necessarily have a full the little vials there to refresh people. So you're going to kind of take a little bit of a beating as you're playing through the campaign. Of course, you're going to get the different special abilities you can spend the experience on, and so you also have that ability of, like, you know, you feel like your character's growing and everything like that. And the other thing that I think to do now is actually force kind of the side quests to be a main objective. So you've not only do you have to complete the objective of the scenario, you have to go and encounter all the side quests as well, or else you fail. And that makes it a little bit more interesting, because then you've got to kind of stretch, and you've got to go over here to where the side quest card is, or go over to this one, and then you've got this also sort of, you know, that thread of a story happening. When I play it like that, it's really, really cool, and that to me is the best way to play it. And I've played 5 of the 7 scenarios, and I played like the first couple like as the campaign, and then just kind of jumped around just to kind of see how that was, where you just kind of level up your guys and then jump into the scenario. And that's actually fine, but like I said, you have that sort of, you get kind of beat up a little bit, and that's kind of cool, and it makes it a little bit more challenging. And I would definitely upgrade the epic, you know, to the epic guys and stuff. And the thing that I want to take away from it is the different scenarios are very different. You know, like a game that I really enjoy is Imperial Assault, but a lot of times it's like, okay, you move over here, open a door, and then Darth Vader pops out, you know, that kind of stuff. So that gets kind of repetitive, whereas the scenarios here are actually very interesting. A lot of times you're like, one that is interesting, the guys are like trying to carry a courier package, it's like got some messages in it, and you're trying to track them down. And one is you're trying to escape from a lair after you get captured. And there's another one where they've captured some people, and you're trying to prevent them from escaping with them. There's this one really cool one where you get to control this crane, and you can do damage with it, and the villain's controlling it. And that's really cool. So there's a lot of interesting cool things. That's the best part of the game, I think, is those interesting scenarios that you can play through. And like I said, though, you gotta definitely increase the difficulty. But having all said that, this actually works fantastic for like kind of a family intro RPG if you just kind of leave it at the basic level. And I think it works really well because it's very, very simple. I think this game is going to, my suspicion is it's going to kind of maybe fly under the radar or maybe be overlooked because it's a little bit subtler than I expected. For example, there's a lot of ability cards. There's no way you're going to get close to all of those abilities, you know, out through the course of a campaign. And so you can kind of tweak your character and kind of focus it different ways. So you can definitely go through the campaign, I would say, at least twice. So that's like 14 plays, and that's pretty good. And so you can kind of play with the different character abilities and stuff like that. And the characters do work very differently. You know, you've got like the Pog and his little robot that he controls, and of course you have like the healer, grenade person, and all that, and they do work very differently. But I would recommend this. I think some people are kind of going to go at it and you're going to see this is kind of easy breezy and there's not a lot to it. But as you play into some of the further scenarios, it really starts to unwrap itself for you, and it's very, very interesting. So I think this game works on a lot of levels. It works on kind of that basic intro RPG. You can play it with kids and stuff and they can get super into it. And it gives you a good role-playing vibe. There's a lot of, you know, text and stuff and sort of background to the stories and the side quests and like just the crazy encounters that come in. So I think it's a very fun game, and I think it's hopefully something that gets some expansions you can kind of expand on it and stuff. So I really enjoyed this, and I think it kind of fits that Warhammer Quest niche, which I think a lot of people are looking for, where you have a real dedicated campaign that you can carry forward. There's, you know, a little quick sort of town session that you can do, and then you move forward. It's now to get kind of into comparison, so you can turn it off now, but I'm gonna kind of go and kind of walk down because I think it's worth noting because it's so different than like Shadows of Brimstone, which is a game I love, and like Galaxy Defenders. And I kind of put Galaxies and Defenders and the, you know, the D&D board games together. And it's not as like variable and maybe even replayable as Shadows of Brimstone. You don't have to put together the models, which is a big plus. The models come in, the models are amazing. I should talk about that again. And it's a little simpler, it's a little more streamlined, but I think it's presented as a different niche, and it's kind of, I think, presented as a way for maybe more miniatures players to come into the board game world as well. Because the one thing about the map system is it's going to be very easy to sort of customize and build terrain for it because it's just, you know, simple grid spaces. I was thinking about the other day when I was looking at it, I was playing, I was like, this is great. This is like Dwarven Forge. I want to go to a whole bunch of Dwarven Forge stuff because it's just like built for that, those corridors and stuff. It works perfect for that. So I could see that if you're a miniatures kind of player, you can get these, you can paint them, you know, you can put up your Dwarven Forge stuff and the game's going to work perfectly, you know, right out of there. You can add little cool dead bodies and different stuff like that on your own. I think it's kind of geared towards that, like, okay, yeah, here's a cool intro RPG you can take and play with the family. But if you want to really get into this world, you can like kick in that hobby brain and like build all the terrain and paint the models and all that stuff. And you don't really have this cumbersome system kind of holding it down. Now this has less in common with Brimstone and more common, I would say, with Galaxy Defenders or the D&D games, because you got sort of that, you know, you flip a card, you activate certain villains, and you know, you have like action movie. It's very simple, and you have the scenarios going through that. But the campaign systemness and the side quest to me is a little bit more interesting than definitely the D&D games, because this is fleshed out. And I haven't played the newest D&D game, but I played enough of the old ones to, you know, kind of be over that. Like I said, it sits kind of in a weird spot, but I think a lot of people that maybe already have a bunch of those style of games will look at this guy. I've got Descent, I've got Imperial Assault, I got Shadows of Brimstone. So that's going to have a hard time getting into that market. But if you don't have this kind of game and you have maybe newer gamers or, you know, families and kids, this is a perfect kind of thing to jump into. And it's a lot of fun. I think the system is solid. Like I mentioned, I know I'm just kind of going, but I kind of want to make the point of, you know, because I feel like sometimes when people say, oh, it's very simple and streamlined, like tons of gamers like just switch off, which is fine. But there's a lot of cool stuff with how stuff spawns and just kind of how it sort of changes up sort of the tactical layout and all that kind of stuff. All right, so definitely a game, if all that stuff makes sense to you, this is a game I would definitely pick up for sure. So anyway, take a look at it. Thanks.